The Twisted Mind of Ted Bundy, a psychological analysis. He was charming, intelligent, and appeared completely normal. Ted Bundy fooled everyone around him, including the people who loved him most. But behind that facade lurked one of the most calculating and dangerous minds in criminal history. Today, we're diving deep into the psychological profile of Ted Bundy to understand how someone becomes a monster hiding in plain sight. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chronicles HQV, and today we're examining one of the most studied cases in criminal psychology. Ted Bundy wasn't just a serial killer. He was a master manipulator who used his understanding of human psychology to prey on victims and evade capture for years. This analysis isn't meant to glorify his crimes, but to understand the warning signs and psychological factors that created such a dangerous individual. Let's begin. The Mask of Sanity. Ted Bundy is often described as the quintessential psychopath. But what does that really mean? Psychopathy isn't just about violence. It's characterized by a specific set of traits that Bundy embodied perfectly. First, there's superficial charm. Bundy was incredibly charismatic. He could walk into any room and immediately put people at ease. Former classmates described him as likable and engaging. He worked at a crisis hotline where he actually helped people in distress. This wasn't an act. Psychopaths can genuinely be charming because they're skilled at reading what others want to hear. Second, grandiose self-worth. Bundy believed he was superior to everyone around him. He saw himself as more intelligent, more sophisticated, more deserving than others. This inflated ego wasn't just confidence. It was a fundamental belief that normal rules didn't apply to him. Third, pathological lying. Bundy lied constantly, even when the truth would have been easier. He created elaborate false identities and backstories. But here's what's fascinating. Psychopaths often believe their own lies in the moment they tell them. Their relationship with truth is fundamentally different from ours. Finally, lack of empathy and remorse. This is perhaps the most chilling aspect. Bundy could intellectually understand that his actions caused pain, but he couldn't feel it. He once described his victims as possessions, objects that existed for his use and disposal. The development of a killer. But how does someone become Ted Bundy? The answer lies in a complex interaction of biological predisposition and environmental factors. Bundy's childhood was marked by deception from the very beginning. He was born to an unwed mother in 1946, which carried significant stigma at the time. To hide this shame, his grandparents raised him as their son, while his mother posed as his sister. Bundy didn't learn the truth about his parentage until he was a teenager. This early deception created what psychologists call identity confusion. Bundy never developed a stable sense of self because his entire early identity was built on a lie. When children can't trust their most basic relationships, they often struggle to form genuine connections throughout their lives. His grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was reportedly violent and abusive, with a volatile temper and racist views. Some family members described him as frightening, and there are accounts of him being cruel to animals. Children learn relationship patterns from their primary caregivers, and Bundy's early models were deception and violence. But here's what's crucial to understand. Millions of people experience difficult childhoods without becoming serial killers. Bundy likely had biological predispositions that interacted with these environmental factors. Recent neuroscience research suggests that psychopaths have differences in brain structure, particularly in areas responsible for empathy and impulse control. Bundy also showed early warning signs that were overlooked or dismissed. As a young child, he was found placing kitchen knives around his sleeping aunt. He was fascinated with violence and death from an early age. He began stealing as a teenager, not out of need but for the thrill. These behaviors suggest conduct disorder, which often precedes adult psychopathy. The psychology of manipulation. What made Bundy so dangerous wasn't just his lack of empathy, it was his sophisticated understanding of human psychology. He was a student of human nature, but he used this knowledge as a weapon. Bundy perfected what psychologists call impression management. He could assess what kind of person someone wanted him to be and transform himself accordingly. With conservative voters, he was clean-cut and respectful. With liberal college students, he was progressive and intellectual. With potential victims, he was helpless and non-threatening. His most famous technique was the fake injury ploy. He would approach young women wearing a fake cast or using crutches, asking for help carrying books or loading something into his car. This exploited several psychological principles simultaneously. First, the halo effect. We assume that people who appear vulnerable or in need are automatically trustworthy. Second, social proof. He targeted women in public places where helping someone seemed like the normal, socially expected thing to do. Third, commitment and consistency. Once someone agreed to help, they felt psychologically committed to following through. Bundy also understood the psychology of authority. He would impersonate police officers or authority figures because people are conditioned to comply with authority without question. He exploited our deepest social programming against us. Perhaps most chillingly, Bundy studied his own crimes like a researcher. He would return to crime scenes to relive his actions and refine his techniques. He treated murder like a skill to be perfected, analyzing what worked and what didn't. This level of calculation is what separates organized killers like Bundy from disorganized ones who act impulsively. The narcissistic core. At the center of Bundy's psychology was malignant narcissism, a combination of narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial features, and sadistic traits. This explains both his motivations and his methods. Narcissists need constant validation and admiration, but they can't form genuine relationships because they see others as objects to be used rather than people with their own value. Bundy's relationships were all transactional. What could each person do for him? His relationship with Elizabeth Klopfer, his long-term girlfriend, perfectly illustrates this. She genuinely loved him and provided him with the appearance of normalcy he needed. But he was simultaneously using her as cover while committing murders. When she began to suspect him and became less useful, his treatment of her became increasingly cold and manipulative. Bundy's narcissism also drove his need to outsmart law enforcement. Getting away with murder wasn't enough. He needed to prove he was smarter than everyone trying to catch him. He would inject himself into investigations, offering to help profile the killer. The irony wasn't lost on him. He enjoyed the intellectual game of describing himself to investigators. His courtroom behavior reveals this narcissism perfectly. He represented himself in court not because he thought it was strategically wise, but because he couldn't bear the idea of someone else controlling his narrative. He needed to be the star of his own show, even when the show was his murder trial. The most disturbing aspect of Bundy's narcissism was how he viewed his victims. They weren't people to him. They were props in his fantasy of power and control. He kept photographs and personal items from victims not as trophies in the traditional sense, but as objects that proved his superiority and control over life and death. Warning signs and lessons. Understanding Bundy's psychology isn't just an academic exercise. It can help us recognize dangerous individuals before they escalate to violence. There were warning signs that people missed or rationalized away. Red flags include superficial charm that feels too perfect, inconsistencies in their personal history, a grandiose sense of self-importance, lack of genuine emotional responses to serious situations, manipulation of others for personal gain, pathological lying, even about small things, and violation of social norms without apparent guilt. But here's the crucial point. Psychopaths like Bundy are masters of deception, specifically because they know how to hide these traits. They study normal human behavior and mimic it convincingly. This is why even trained professionals were fooled by Bundy. The most important lesson is to trust your instincts. Many people who interacted with Bundy reported feeling something was off about him, even when they couldn't articulate why. Our subconscious minds often pick up on inconsistencies before our conscious minds do. We must also understand that evil rarely announces itself. Bundy wasn't obviously monstrous. He was charming, intelligent, and seemingly normal. This is perhaps the most frightening lesson of all. The most dangerous people among us may be the ones we least suspect. Conclusion. Ted Bundy represents the intersection of nature and nurture at its most terrifying. His case teaches us that evil can hide behind the most appealing facades, and that understanding criminal psychology is crucial for both law enforcement and society as a whole. By studying cases like Bundy's, we don't glorify the criminal, we arm ourselves with knowledge. We learn to recognize manipulation, trust our instincts, and understand that true evil often comes disguised as normalcy. The victims of Ted Bundy deserved better than to become footnotes in the story of a killer's twisted psychology. By understanding how predators think and operate, we honor their memory by potentially preventing future tragedies. What aspects of criminal psychology would you like to explore next? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the minds that shaped criminal history. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.